When Lauren was 15 years old, her family moved across the country and she started going to a new school. Already shy, Lauren suffered from low self-confidence and had a hard time transitioning. Nothing felt right, and soon her changing body became a source of insecurity. Eventually, she began thinking that maybe if she lost weight and focused on fitness, she'd make more friends and feel better about herself, and life would get better. Soon she became obsessed with dieting, and it quickly spiraled into her subsisting only on rice cakes and apples and candy corn and celery. She liked this new feeling of control every time she stood on the scale and saw a lower number. She was achieving something, and that made her feel good. Soon, she thought of nothing else. But what Lauren couldn't see was that she was no longer healthy, even when her hair started falling out and her skin grew dry and cracked, and when she could never get warm. When she looked in the mirror, she still saw a chubby girl. Her family, though, did notice, and yet, at a visit to the doctor, she was just told to eat more. She didn't. One day, while jogging, she had a heart attack and collapsed. As a teenager, she was 5'7" and weighed 82 pounds. Lauren was finally admitted to a psychiatric hospital where she was treated for anorexia nervosa. She was put on bed rest, saw a therapist twice a week, joined a support group, and slowly began eating small amounts of food again. Her recovery was slow, but with the support of her family and doctors, she was released 8 months later. Though Lauren suffered a few relapses over the years, she is now healthy. Ultimately, she was lucky. Anorexia, bulimia, and other eating and body dysmorphic disorders can kill. Eating disorders are among the deadliest psychological disorders, with some of the highest rates of death directly attributable to the illness. They slowly ruin the body, but in order for these conditions to be recognized and treated successfully, they have to be understood as disorders of the mind.
Thank you, Crash Course, for that tragic story with a happy ending to introduce us to body dysmorphia and body image. Although Lauren's story presented some reasons we might experience issues with body image, let's change gears and talk about how culture plays a part in the supposedly ideal body. Thank you ahead of time to Cosmopolitan magazine for the helpful graphics outlining changes in the ideal throughout the decades. In the pre-Prohibition era, society valued roundness and softness in females, as evidenced by the first supermodel, Evelyn Nesbit. You can see here the focus on her long neck and soft, rounded facial features and shoulders. Prohibition brought an era of rebellion that changed the focus to flat, straight lines for females. Pay attention as we move forward, and you may see some of these trends cycling back in later decades. Mary Pickford paints this picture well in the 1920s with her thin limbs and relatively small bust. The end of Prohibition and the beginning of the Depression introduced some comeback for curves, but particularly for emphasis on the waistline and hips. Whereas our image of 1920s icon Mary Pickford hid her waist entirely, you can see the focus on hips in this shot of 1930s star Jean Harlow. World War II in the 1940s interestingly guided the ideal toward more angles and broader shoulders. You can see this well in this image of Katharine Hepburn, a symbol of the era, with the emphasis on her wide shoulders and the angles of her chin, cheeks, and collarbones. Even her pose focuses on angularity. The post-war boom brought even body image to incorporating a desire for more, especially in the bust and hip areas. This image demonstrates the striking hourglass shape of one of the area's figureheads, Elizabeth Taylor. Then, the countercultural hippie movement turned the body image script on its head, emphasizing very skinny features. Twiggy, a top model of the time, fit the bill to a T. Look at how easily we can see the tendons in her arms. In the 70s, unhealthy weight loss fads remained popular, but height grew in popularity as well. Farrah Fawcett fit this fad. As you can see, even her clothing in this casual photo emphasizes her lean limbs and waist while making her feel quite tall. The 80s maintained focus on the thin idea, but saw height grow even more. The 80s ideal, though, wanted all that height in the legs. Elle Macpherson embodied in this ideal, as clearly shown by this image's focus on her extraordinarily long and lean legs. The 1990s toned down on the height craze, but doubled down on the fear of fat. As might be expected, as the male ideal had also been trending this direction as well, fear of fat engendered a madness for muscle in the 2000s. Britney Spears dominated the decade with her famously toned abs. Finally bringing us, in the 2010s, back to going bananas for backsides. As in the 30s and 50s, a large buttocks and an hourglass shape defined the ideal. Kim Kardashian doesn't look so different in this photo than Elizabeth Taylor did in her day. Before we thank all Crash Course and Cosmopolitan once again, along with all of our photo sources, ask yourself what your ideal is for your body, because if you ask anyone else, they'll just change their mind in the next 10 years.